Oh, all right. Welcome back to the Watch Well podcast. It's been a while since our last episode. My name is Parker, and I am your host. My co-host here is Nick. Nick, how was your week?
I've had a really good week, but we should really talk more about the last 2 or 3 months. And I don't want to get into all of that. What I want to know and what I want to talk about is what's been going on with you and what update people might need from you. So why don't you go into that, inform the people?
Well, I had well, technically I should say my wife had a baby, but I caught him. So I did a lot of the work, and I think that she should, have an award. We should frame, the picture, put it on the wall. And no, it was great. She actually went into labor really early into the morning, and we wouldn't have made it to the hospital. So we had the baby right behind our couch in the living room. So it was great. And his name is Riker, and I'm going to throw a picture up on the screen here. Riker Jace. And he is the cutest thing ever since our firstborn. So that's what's been happening with me. That's why we haven't been doing episodes. So for any of you guys,
that you're a baseball guy,
yeah,
that you catched him.
He was a catcher too.
Yeah, I was a catcher.
So
there you go. Yeah,
which means his knees are shot, but he was okay for this.
Yeah. That's great. So we are going to review the Fabelmans for this episode. Before we get into that, we want to introduce our guest. And I accidentally had the graphic up on the screen before, but this is Greg Cross from the Digital Church podcast. If you guys want to check out the Digital Church podcast with Greg, you can check it out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. It's pretty much everywhere, wherever you want to consume your podcast content. He's born in Richmond, Indiana. He's a Ball State Cardinal. And then I have some other logos. Chirp. I have some other logos up on the screen. InterVarsity, CCM, Glimpse, and Faith Video. I'm going to go ahead and let Greg just kind of give us the rundown on just a little about him. So, Greg.
Hey, I love technology. I love it that I'm here, you're there, Nick somewhere else. But I appreciate you guys having me on the podcast. Yeah, a little bit about me. My entrepreneurial. Well, let me start with my family. So my wife and I, we have 5 kids and 6 grandkids, and then I convinced my wife last fall to get a puppy. Yes, a real life puppy. So we have like an 8.5, 9-month-old little miniature Aussie Doodle, which now I should have said I had 7 kids or 6 kids.
I know that's a kid that doesn't grow up.
I know. And they're furry and stuff, and they're they need way more attention sometimes than a kid. But we're huge dog lovers. And when I graduated, you mentioned that I graduated from Ball State. And so when I got out of Ball State, I just really felt the call of my life to go into full-time ministry. And, I even tried a couple of stabs at going to seminary, but that just never worked out for me. But I feel like I've read enough theology books that I should get some type of honorary MDiv, without the Greek or anything. But I took, I went with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, served for 9 years and college students up at Valparaiso University, and itinerated. There's an old missionary term for you, but went to Notre Dame, saw Touchdown Jesus in the football field, and led Bible studies over there at Notre Dame, and then went to Hammond, Indiana at Calumet, which is a Purdue campus. So then after that, guys, I went on staff at a 4,000 member church in Columbia, South Carolina. Very, very streamlined, conservative. I mean, I had to wear one of those suit and ties every day. Imagine that, Nick, having to show up at work literally. And just a funny story. When I first moved there, we needed to get a second car. And so I wanted something just cheap, because literally it was just a point A to point B. My commute was like 3 miles every day. Right. And so I went and I had this guy, I found his old Honda. Hondas are great. Hondas are a nice car, everybody told me. And so I liked this car. It was The Price is Right. And this guy in a good old South Carolina. So if you're from South Carolina, don't be offended at the accent I'm about to unveil. But he said, all right, you know that this car doesn't have AC. And I'm like, okay, what's the big deal, you know? And so he would go on and show me this. He goes, all right, sir, I just want, this car does not have air conditioning. I'm like, okay, dude, what's the big deal? So do you want my money or not? So I bought the car and put my suit and tie on like I did. And I tell you what, the first humidity day, literally, I mean, I was just drenched in the 3.5 mile commute. And then those words were in my head. This car doesn't have it. I know why he was this, I'm a Yankee from Indiana moving to South Carolina. And he's like, I don't understand why you don't want to buy a car that doesn't have AC or want to buy a car that has AC. Anyway, so on church there, guys, then moved back to Indiana. And that's where I kind of I know God was calling me into, just to become a businessman. A lot of people do it the reverse, right? I mean, go into business, and then as they get older, they go, oh, I want to serve the Lord and full-time work somewhere. So I started a business, CCM Creative, in 2006, where I worked for a company in Chicago for 4 years, kind of cut my teeth in technology, website development, worked with churches. I've worked with churches a lot in my life. And so then I started my own firm where we still to this day develop WordPress websites, et cetera, et cetera. And then video hit in 2020 during the pandemic. And the pandemic was probably one of the best things that ever happened to my business, because now everybody's on a screen, everybody's in front of a microphone, a camera. And so I think God kind of really put me in that space. And then, so that's been going well. And then last summer, the September of 2022, I got, I have all this connections with churches and stuff. So I got the idea to start Faith Video, which is now the exact same product as Glimpse Video, but it's just rebranded and targeting to churches. So loving it. And then the podcast. Then I thought, I've always, for 6 years, and so I'm envious of guys like you that, have been doing a podcast a little longer than I have. And, but it's been fun, as you guys know, just having consistent content and everything is always kind of, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? That thing, but I appreciate being on. That's me, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
and Greg, real quick,
go.
Greg, before we forget, cause I don't want to forget this, where can people connect with you on social media?
Yeah, probably the best way is through LinkedIn. I mean,
Okay.
It's just as a connect with me, just type in my name, Greg Cross, and then kind of match up my face to my image there.
Yeah.
But as you said at the top, go to the digitalchurchpodcast.com, thedigitalchurchpodcast.com, and then you can catch my podcast there.
Awesome.
And for those that don't know, or haven't seen it, Greg was gracious enough to have me as a guest on the Digital Church podcast. It was a great time. I've seen a few other episodes as well, so I would definitely encourage people, if you're listening to this and enjoy this, you're probably going to enjoy that too. So go check that out.
And even as the recording of this podcast, Nick's interview is the top trafficked interview so far.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we got to keep that up.
Yeah,
so
keep it up.
Repeat viewings are good. So if you've seen it, go watch again, and then
just memorize it.
You did a good job, and it was just a really good conversation. So thanks for being on.
Yeah, that's why we sent Nick and not me.
Yeah, right.
Because he's the talent. Cool. So, like we said, today we're going to review The Fabelmans. Greg, you did pick this movie. Before we get into ratings or the plot or anything, for people who haven't seen it, I'm interested into why you picked the movie.
I've always been a huge Spielberg fan, and that's probably that alone is the reason why. It still baffles me to this day, guys, why Spielberg has never won an Oscar, unless I'm mistaken, for Best Picture.
I think Warhorse.
Was it Warhorse?
We need like a research person to tell us.
I'm looking it up right now.
But I think
possibly. There's been Oscars given to his films, like for best sound effect, but never has he ever personally won. And I just, I mean, when you think of some of his movies like Schindler's List, like that should have got, but I don't. I guess in the
Schindler's List in '94 Academy Award for Best Picture.
Was it really?
Okay.
Yep.
Was it? Yeah.
Yep. This is just what Google brings up. Hugo Award, Primetime Emmy, Golden
See, now I
Globe for
thought
Best
that I thought
Director,
that it
Saving
didn't.
Private
Well, then
Ryan.
I
Actually,
sit
hang
corrected.
on. I just want to
Saving
no,
Private
hang on.
Ryan is awesome.
I want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'm not getting the full story here. So hang on.
Maybe it was just nominated.
He was just nominated, I think. Oh no, that's. I don't know.
Somebody will correct us in
Somebody,
comments.
yeah, comment down
Yeah.
below if you can find out the information. We can't. Google is being unreliable.
So in the lead up to this episode and announcing, you know what, we sent out a post asking people what their favorite Spielberg film is, and it's basically just everything. Like that's the responses that I've seen.
E.T. Who has not seen E.T.?
Everyone that said E.T. They're basically just saying. I think one person said no filmmaker has the just the sheer number of almost perfect films, is what one person said. So
all of them
even
are so
choose.
good. Good. I think I do have to go with Saving Private Ryan though as my favorite.
I mean, haven't you? Anytime you watch a Spielberg, I never ever at the end go, "Dang, I just wasted a bunch of money."
Right.
I've never said that, or that left me lacking.
Or it was like
You know?
the plot wasn't robust enough, or even like, the writing, because we did Dark Knight, and just the plot holes and stuff, and just
Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dark Knight Rises. That's
Yeah.
what I meant. Yeah, just sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, Nick. I know that's your favorite movie
Not
of all
the Dark
time.
Knight. Dark Knight's perfect. But Dark Knight Rises, we can.
He said that on my podcast
that
too, Parker.
I know.
He was like beating me up. Like,
I know.
You've never seen any of these Batman
He's a
movies?
he's a little
I haven't.
fanboy, and most of the time, when he's at his desk and we're on this podcast, you can see the what is it, Nick? It's like a 7,000 page film book on the Dark Knight.
Yeah, it is the compiled screenplay.
The
for
screenplay.
all
If
three
you
of
look
the
at
Dark
those
Knight
leaves
trilogy.
real closely on his curtains there, they look Batman.
They do, yeah. They're little bats behind him on the curtains.
They look like
That's
little
awesome.
bat wings.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's
They
awesome.
might
Cool.
as well be.
So let's jump into the ratings, Nick.
All right, so this movie is PG-13. Common Sense Media recommends that only kids 13 and up watch this film, which is obviously right in line with PG-13. But then Plugged In Movie Reviews says that its content is heavy for kids, medium for teens, and light for adults. So, we like to kind of give our thoughts on that. So 13 and up, and I'll just stick with the kids rating. And it says it's heavy for kids. And I don't know I guess under 13 is what they mean by kids. They don't really give an age range, but so heavy for kids and medium for teens. Would you guys agree with that?
I would personally agree with the kids rating, but I disagree with teens and adults.
Okay, so how so?
I think it's heavy. I think it's heavy across the board.
You think so?
No, I do, and I think that you could do a medium adult rating, but I guess my reasoning is more about the desensitization to infidelity that we have in our society, and I think that especially the way they filmed it, how the kid found out first by reviewing footage.
Mm-hmm.
That was just gut wrenching. Me as a father of two young boys.
Yeah,
That's just, I just think that's heavy for across the board, all ages. It's.
But I have some later thoughts. I don't want to jump the gun, but I'm not condoning it, but I think that played into part of the narrative of what Spielberg was trying to say in this movie.
Okay.
yeah.
No, that's great. No, I'm excited to talk about that. I just from a rating perspective, I think that I think it's just heavy.
Yeah.
What do you think, Greg?
I could go with that. I guess those terms are kind of new to me, subjective in that context.
They are, yeah, a little
because, I mean, I didn't think it was definitely light, but if you had gone through a divorce or you witnessed infidelity of friends, family, or whatever, I think it kind of brought back some of those pains. But I don't know. I didn't
I guess
I don't
I
know.
guess
didn't
I'm
think
saying like if we're looking at like rated R or PG-13, those types of things,
Oh yeah.
I think that maybe a medium rating, like status quo, or what you would expect a
Gotcha.
medium rating would
Gotcha.
be. But I
Yeah.
guess my where I'm coming from, or my viewpoint is we've been desensitized to those things. So
Okay, that's fair.
that's just kind of my thing.
Yeah. No, I could see that.
So
But
you
I don't
think
think it
it-
was graphic, or I don't think that it was overplayed or portrayed grotesquely, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I'm basically right on board with the ratings that I read off. But in addition, if anyone's interested, this does have a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes and 7.6 out of 10 on IMDb, which puts it, probably not a top 10 movie on IMDb, but it's up there. If you're near an 8 on IMDb, then it's generally agreed that it's a fantastic movie if you're near that 8 mark, that average score. So yeah, this is a very popular, and the Oscars were this past week, and I have no idea if this was even nominated for anything.
Yes, it was.
It was.
It was nominated. And after seeing the movie, which, I like this movie, but it kind of left me a little wanting, but I can see why it didn't win Best Picture, because I definitely would not have voted. I don't understand why Top Gun Maverick didn't get Best Picture.
Yeah, I think Maverick should have run away with it, but that's a whole other podcast on why Top Gun Maverick didn't win. So I guess the plot, just to fill some people in, like if you're listening and you haven't seen the movie, growing up in a post-World War II era Arizona, young Sammy Fabelman aspires to become a filmmaker as he reaches adolescence, but soon discovers a shattering family secret, which we kind of touched on a little bit already, and explores how the power of films can help him see the truth.
Yeah, and that's the official synopsis, right?
Yep, that is the official.
Yeah. And so I've read that this is basically a fictionalized version of what would be Spielberg's autobiography.
Yep.
So I mean, I don't know how much
in 2
of the
hours.
story, yeah, his life story. I don't know how much of it's true, how much what was actually pulled directly from his life and what wasn't. I would assume the ending, and Greg, feel free to share spoilers and stuff as we go along, just so we people know that this is a spoiler zone. So
Okay, good.
yeah, it's too hard not to share some stuff every once in a while. But I would guess that the ending with John Ford
Had to be.
He walked into this. I'm guessing that was true.
What do you see? Where's the
Yeah,
horizon? It's at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's at the top. It's interesting.
I would imagine that was that actually happened in Spielberg's
Had to be.
early in his career, or before his career even started, I guess. But yeah, so I think it's an autobiography, basically, fictionalized.
Yeah.
You guys jumped all the way to the end. We need
Yeah,
to
we tend to do that. We do tend to do that. It's like,
around a
hey, we're
little
going to
bit.
talk about the movie. Okay, so this is how it ended.
Yeah.
I mean, I got tons to say, but I'm like, I don't want to start at the end.
No, okay, where do you want to start, Greg?
Wait, why don't you hold up your notes first, just for everyone?
Oh yeah,
to-
so I have 6 pages of notes, so don't be like
He came
freaking me
prepared.
out and
The
like,
man.
All right, well, thank you for coming.
The man
Thanks,
came
Greg.
prepared.
So here's where I start, because again, when I watch a movie, guys, I'm always I'm kind of like watching it with like 3 heads. I got me, just the consumer, like, is this entertaining? Am I liking this experience? And then I've got little critiquey guy over here going, okay, what was Spielberg thinking? When he starts weaving all this stuff together, and then I got, another. And so I, like, from the very beginning, I just thought it was interesting, some of the phrases that I caught. It says dreams are scary. There was one part in there when he said, dreams are scary. And when he saw that train wreck, there was a train wreck in a movie that he saw. And it's interesting, at least in the film, how that kind of shaped his little, I'm assuming he was probably around 10, 11. It kind of shaped his psyche, and his mom, Mitzi, said later, she goes, well, he needs to control that. Because he woke up, he had a kind of a nightmare of this envisioning this train wreck happening all the time. And so he starts off with that in the narrative, which I think begins to kind of, that's the starting point for the whole movie, right? That's what kind of builds on, and it makes you start. Then my critiquey head over here is going, okay, is this Spielberg really kind of telegraphing to us as an audience that this is my whole life, guys, that I've been trying to use films to control reality. I've been using films to try to control the narrative. And there's some other things, but I'll stop there.
Like bringing order into the chaos of life, everything going on around. And I think that probably, and I'm not going to jump ahead because I don't want to jump too far past some of the thoughts that you're sharing, but that probably plays a role. That whole idea of film brings order to chaos in the way he responds when he finds out the secret.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think it's interesting you say that because he found out the secret and then things kind of, they moved and there's a whole bunch of issues with dad and then he stopped. And then he became depressed. So maybe there's something to that for sure.
Well, and then when you think it, and this is again at the very beginning of the movie, so you have the dad, which I can't remember, what's the name of the dad?
His name is Bert.
Bert. See, I don't think I ever kept that. So Bert and Mitzi. So you had Bert, who was just, you know, an all dry business guy, you know, nose to the grindstone, genius. I mean, he went to, you know, work for some companies and they just, people, you know, they hired him because he had a brain. And then Mitzi, this fun loving spark of life and everything. And then you've got Sammy, or Steven Spielberg, in the middle of all that, trying to figure out what is real. And so do you remember when they were driving home and they drove into their cul-de-sac and they said something about, you know, like, oh, look at the house. And then Sammy said, you know, oh, ours is the dark house with no lights.
Yeah, sure.
He said, ours is the dark house with no light. And so, you know, and that's because his mom, you know, was the life of the party. But I think Sammy, you know, he's all like, our life is boring. You know, we're a Jewish family that just, we don't know how to have fun, you know? And then I think he lived a lot early on in his life, you know, where his mom's praise was, you remember when he watched one of his first films, his mom, Mitzi, responded and said, that was the greatest show on earth. That was the exact quote that he gave Sammy. And he just got the hugest smile on his face. Yeah. And so anybody that's been in, you know, show business, and it doesn't have to be show business, but, you know, I think that became a motivation for him because it's like, wow, I made my mom take notice of what I did.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
And that fueled him in that pursuit. I thought that was really interesting. And then that tornado scene, that was to me was the pinnacle of showing him, you know, that his mom was just kind of an adventurer. She loved the chase, the adventure. Now, what I don't understand, I would like your guys' thought on it is, you know, when she got to that scene and then those shopping carts went racing across, I had a hard time trying to figure out what Spielberg was saying there.
Well, so the quote right before they run out of the house, or she takes the kids and puts them in the car because they run in and say, there's a tornado outside, because the kids have to say it a couple times.
Oh yeah. I know where you're going.
Get the attention. And so I think the first time one of the kids says there's a tornado outside, doesn't she say, and I don't know the exact quote, but it's something like there's an even bigger one in here.
Yes, that's
because
correct.
her and the dad are having an argument about something. And I think, so the way that I see that, I see in a sense, like this is her running into the chaos because she's already in a chaotic moment in her mind right there in the home.
Yep.
It can't be more chaotic than it is right now. This is the biggest tornado. So in a sense, she's fleeing. And then I think that's part of her maybe artistic and kind of free spirit nature, is that she maybe doesn't see the reality behind the danger of her decision. And then so when she sees those shopping carts blowing across the road, I think in that moment the reality kicks in. Like she now knows that, I might have just put my family in danger. And then
Gotcha.
I think that
Okay.
potentially that's not only the realization, this decision, me running out in the car, driving towards a tornado, but that might also play into my love of, what was the friend's name?
Benny.
Benny. My relationship with Benny is throwing my family into chaos and might be heading for some type of bad or dangerous type of situation where everything could potentially fall apart. I don't know. I see those things as connected.
No,
that tornado, that
that's
whirlwind, that's going on there.
Yeah, because I forgot that she said that in the house where she said, you know, hey, there's a tornado going on here. What are you talking about? And then she, when they went outside, she goes, oh, you guys were telling the truth.
Right.
You know, and then it was somewhere in there too where she had that phrase that repeated itself. Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. It's like she's trying to comfort herself, right? She's trying to
cope.
She's trying to convince herself of there being a reason behind I just randomly ran outside in a tornado with my children. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
and even Bert was like, what are you doing? Because he was he's the guy that always played it safe, you know, and he's like, what are you doing? Well, you know, this is insane. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then through that, then they had another change of scenery. Then that's when the dad, Bert, introduced, you know, that he was moving the family to Arizona. And then there's the famous, then when they got to Arizona, then there's the famous camping scene.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Do what?
Go ahead.
The camping scene.
Yeah.
Takeaways on the.
Well, I mean, there's a kind of a series of scenes, I guess, but are you talking about the headlight scene?
Yeah, just the whole,
Yeah.
I mean, just that whole experience, because I think it was actually a pretty long part in the movie.
Yeah, it was a really good chunk. I honestly, while watching it, I was trying to figure it all out. What I thought was going to be happening. So that it all happens before you know for certain that something's going on between Benny and
which was
Mom.
good cinematography.
Right. Yeah, but so the way the daughter, so for those that don't know, there's a scene where it's dark. They say, "Hey, Sammy, why aren't you shouldn't you be filming this?" And he says, "It's too dark. I can't film." And then Benny gets up and goes and turns on the headlights to the car so that they have light. And then Sammy picks up the camera and starts filming. And the mom is dancing around the campsite in a white dress,
see-through,
which when the light is shining on it is see-through. So I think where I thought they were going at that point in time was, you know, they just had Benny's lingering eye on Mitzi
and Bert. I think it's fair to say Bert, his eye was on her too. I mean, it's his wife.
His wife, but just that lingering eye of Benny. And then not only that, but the daughter's, would you call it protective? Like her protective nature over her mom?
I would say conviction. There was a conviction that this is wrong.
I was going to use the word shame, not to be like, sorry, but like a shame. Like, don't you have any respect for our mom?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And then also kind of that, Mom, don't you have any respect for yourself?
Right.
Right. That level of it. She's jumping up and telling her mom that the dress is see-through. And then when Mom doesn't respond or stop, she turns and looks at Benny and says, "Benny, look away. Stop looking." Right. And then he doesn't stop looking. He just continues to stare, and it's all being filmed. And so I thought so that's like the first hint at some type of relationship between Benny and Mitzi. But I thought it was going to kind of go downhill in a more diabolical way. like where Benny maybe became an aggressor or something. That's what I thought was coming later.
Well,
Like there would
even
be some type of unwanted advance that was coming later. But that's not what happened.
As someone watching it, I was kind of clueless at that point that Benny had a thing for her. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I didn't. Did you think that there was something going on at that point between them? I didn't.
I mean, only the stare. The stare kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only thing.
Yeah,
that
I don't remember exactly what. I don't remember. I took it from the perspective of more that Benny was just a creep. He was just the creep that was. He was just a creep that was hanging around the family. Dad's working all the time because he's a genius and he's very hyper successful at his job. And I had some notes written.
And that's
down here
never
too.
happened in any movie before, where the husband's away and some
right
comes in and.
But I think the dynamic between I think the dynamic between and maybe this isn't fully teased out in my head yet, but I think that there's a battle between, or I guess it's the extremes of logic and emotion. So the mom, Mitzi, is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mitzi. So Mitzi is 100% emotion. She's the joy, she's the fun, the adventure, kind of like you said, Greg. Dad is all the logic, the brains, logic, we're moving. Don't care about anything else, don't care about your school.
His career.
It's just career, logic,
his
brain, just hyper focused on that. And I think that Mitzi was his release from his job and Benny was her release from her husband. So I think Mitzi, because she's so emotional, she needs something that Dad's not giving her, because he's so hyper focused on job, and the logic and everything that is going on in his brain because he's so smart. Benny is her release because he's taking care of him is her job, and then Dad's release from his job and being a hyper intellectual or whatever it was, computers or televisions or whatever it was. His release from that was her. And there was never this connection in the marriage, equally yoked or whatever you want to call it, to balance the differences. And so you see the affair.
So can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it almost sounds like what you're saying is to kind of take some terms from the book Wild at Heart, how, men are wired to pursue adventure, right? And then women come alongside in that adventure. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to be the adventure themselves, but they want to go along for the ride of the adventure.
Right.
So that's
and the difference between the two and the difference between the two men is Benny took her along with the adventure and the dad didn't. She was not capable of, and he didn't invite her in.
She was his adventure. Yeah, because later in the film, after everything had already fallen apart, one of the sisters says something like, "Dad is her greatest audience."
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And to kind of fuel off what you guys are saying, it's interesting because at several points, at least, there was this focus on selfishness, and that word got used a lot. The sister calling Sammy selfish, even Mitzi at one point telling herself, yes, I am selfish and I realize this is selfish. So you had the dad. So you had like a little triangle, the dad, who I never really heard him say, that character say he was selfish, but his life proved it. So he was selfish because he wanted that career advancement and goals. Then you had Sammy, who pretty much he was selfish in the sense that he just threw everything into his art. And then
kind of like Dad.
Yeah, we talk exactly when we talk about Uncle Boris here in a few moments, he kind of exposes that. And then you have Mitzi, who probably, I'm not trying to, so if we get into the spiritual, at least she acknowledged that. She's like, I know this is selfish. Mm-hmm. And there was even a point where in my notes where I wrote out, that she told Sammy, she said, guilt is a waste of emotion. Despite my countless faults, I'm not ruining everything for everyone. I'm not going to be selfish. Mm-hmm. And that was a quote that she said
That was after she ran out of the car, right?
Yeah, and it's not. She never lived up to that. She actually did become selfish. But I think, you know, like Apostle Peter comes to mind. You know, like Jesus, or Peter, before the day's over, I will not deny you, Lord. I mean,
sure.
And she, I think there was a little bit of grace in that moment.
That's a good point. Yeah.
She was like kind of going, guilt is a waste of emotion, but she was trying to reach out to Sammy and work through her own struggle. She's like, I know I don't want to ruin the whole family, but guess what? In the end, she ended up ruining the whole family.
Well, okay, so this is kind of the stuff that I thought about most in the movie. You mentioned the struggle, and what I saw was the struggle between what the heart wants and then what you should do based off of what we're taught in Scripture. And those can be two very different things. And the turmoil and tension that we feel a lot of the times is the simple decision. The emotions and the feelings are complex, but the decision's always simple. Are you going to be obedient to Scripture, or are you going to follow your wicked and deceptive heart? Mm-hmm. And through the eyes of everything, you should always, no matter what you feel, you should always take Scripture and compare what you believe in your heart, what you believe, your values, any convictions that you feel the Holy Spirit is laying on your heart. You should always contrast that with what Scripture teaches, so you know for sure that you're actually following and being obedient to Scripture and to God. And I think that was beautifully displayed in the movie, that tension where she's like, I want Benny, I want to be with him, but I know it's not the right thing, and I know it's selfish. And ultimately, to your point, Greg, she chooses incorrectly. She chooses her deceptive heart. She allows herself to be deceived.
To quote another Steven Spielberg movie, you chose unwisely. You chose unwisely. Yeah. Well, there's go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, this is once again just jumping all over the place in my head, but it kind of culminates for her story. Her final message to Sammy is, and she says it differently. So she doesn't quote exactly this, but it's essentially follow your heart. Mm-hmm. Right, which is a modern day story of people try to sell that as a story of hope.
Absolutely,
right.
Yep.
Do what your heart wants. Follow your heart. If you feel it strongly enough, if you have enough positive feelings in your heart about this thing, then go do it.
And if it feels good, it can't be wrong.
Yeah, your heart wants what it wants. Follow it. But then, to your point, Parker, that's where the movie's worldview starts to differentiate and conflict with the biblical worldview, because, like what you said, the Bible says that the heart is deceitful and wicked, and so there's that. So they ultimately the mom's message,
So can we go to Uncle Boris?
Go for it.
Yes, we can.
Uncle Boris shows up on the scene. And if you've never seen the movie, so Uncle Boris pulls up in a cab. He gets out.
I love that scene.
Mitzi sees Uncle, and she freaks out. I mean, she does not even want to open the door, because she had been living with this image of her uncle from everything that her mom,
it's terrifying,
Uncle Boris's brother, was saying, like, he's terrible. He did this to me and did that. And he may have. We don't see that insight. Well, but Uncle Boris gets there, and there's a scene in Sammy's bedroom, and I quote, he says this to Sammy. He says, "Sammy, art is your heart." Mm-hmm. And I think Sammy, and again, this is where I kind of go back to that critiquey head side, like, is Spielberg kind of foreshadowing to us about the fact that he devoted a lot of his life to his art, and he missed some opportunities with his kids, missed some opportunities with his wife, he missed some opportunities in relationships, because he says art is your heart. And at another point, he looked at Sam and he says, "You love your art more than your family." Yeah. And Sammy's like going, "No, I don't. No, I don't." But he kind of did.
But and Uncle Boris is that exact that exact thing as well, because wasn't he
Yep.
he was in the circus, right?
Mhm.
Traveling, and
He missed out on family stuff.
yeah,
He
there's
missed-
that funny scene where, Sammy basically says the circus is art. Sticking your head in a lion's mouth is art. And
Oh,
he's
that
like,
was a
"That's not
great
art."
that was a great
Yeah.
quote. I forget it. Maybe I can find it. He's like, no,
so-
no, that's he said, no, that's balls. He said sticking your head in the lion's mouth, but then he said getting it not to bite your head off or something like that is the art, or
That's
something
art.
like that. Yeah.
And I think in that same scene, I wrote this down. I don't know if I wrote it down exactly right, but I think, didn't Uncle Boris say something like, art will give you crowns in heaven and laurels on earth, but it will tear your heart out?
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
so I think again that was a very revealing, but it was more revealing to me that Spielberg, being one of the script writers, chose to put that in there and display that for the whole world to see.
Yeah. I think
I
so.
mean, and to see
That's
insight
good.
into if it's truly his life that yes, I love film and I made a lot of great movies, but maybe I loved it too much.
Maybe it was, to use some biblical terms, maybe it was an idol.
Oh yeah.
Maybe I was worshiping
Absolutely.
it. Maybe I was treating it as my God.
And
Right.
so that kind of, hit home with me, because even I was watching, I'm like, okay, what we all as men, we pour ourselves into our jobs. Men, we kind of typically identify with a career. When we meet somebody, so what do you do, Parker?
Mhm.
What do you do? What do you do, Nick? And we
Mhm.
identify with, and we make judgments, oh, you do that. Wow, that's cool. Like, oh, you do that. So
Yeah, for sure.
So I just want to kind of revisit some of these quotes here because just so we can be authentic. So Mitzi Fabelman to Sammy, you do what your heart says you have to because you don't owe anyone your life, not even me. And then let's see, down here, Uncle Boris says, family, art, life, it will tear you in two. Art will give you crowns in heavens and laurels on earth, but also it will tear your heart out and leave you lonely. You'll be a Shonda, which is disgrace in
There you go.
Yiddish. For your loved
Yeah.
ones, an exile in the desert, a gypsy. Art is no game. Art is dangerous as a lion's mouth. It'll bite your head off.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a little short piece in the film, but I thought it was very poignant. And then when we skip through, then we get to the discovery scene, where then that's the next big chunk in the movie where Sammy discovers his mom and Benny holding hands. Did they kiss? Did he catch him kissing, or was it just kind of a?
I think
It was
so.
kind of like fuzzy. It was fuzzy.
I took it as a kiss.
It looked like potentially, but it could have, I mean, they didn't actually show it. So it could have just been like an intimate whisper or something, and and it was just really
But
close.
it kind of left your mind
but,
reeling.
yeah,
Something
it definitely
intimate.
was some. Yeah, it was reasonable to think.
I thought that whole scene
something's
was
not right here.
I thought that whole
Yeah.
scene was incredible because
I thought so, too.
what more of an impactful way? Because she's yelling at him. They're fighting in the kitchen. They walk into the room.
Well, this is actually even later than what Greg mentioned.
Oh,
So what you're saying is when Mom finds out that Sammy is known and has it on film. But
Yeah,
this
so
is
when
just Sammy's first.
Oh, I thought we
when
were
he
talking
first
about
sees
the
the-
full the
This
full
is
thing.
for- yeah. So then when he sees it, he sees his mom, but then Parker, when he actually creates the film, obviously he leaves all that out.
Yeah, right.
And then she comes to him. Again, this is another, I don't know you guys know the movie terms, but then Mitzi turns to her son. Again, he knows what actually really happened. And she says, "Oh, Sammy, you really see me." And he has this kind of blank stare and go like, "I know, Mom,
more than you know.
more than you know."
Yeah.
And I chose not to put that in there. And so it
Yeah.
kind of made me ask the question, can movies reveal what's really happening? I mean, do what we see on the screen, is that the screenwriter's objective to give us reality or just partial reality?
I think that's a good
Spielberg-
question. I think Nick and I think we in a previous episode we talked about this a little bit. And Nick, you communicate this really well when you say that usually what you're seeing is I'm gonna say it in my own way, but you it's usually smoke and mirrors for a bigger life truth or belief that the director, producer, whoever is trying to communicate. So it's a lot of action, or it's a lot of drugs, alcohol, a lot of sex, whatever it is. It's usually a lot of different things that amount to a bigger reveal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. They're building blocks and pieces to communicate a larger concept that is true, even if the individual building blocks aren't.
And that's when it gets really muddy, because Hollywood's very left-leaning, and a lot of these people that are in control of these movies are pushing agendas or their own beliefs, and it gets very relative. So when we say truth from movies in Hollywood, the vast majority of them, we're using that very loosely.
Well, that. So towards the end, when that discussion between his dad, and he goes, "What about your college roommate?" He goes, "Oh, Dad, he voted for Goldberg." If you know anything about Goldberg, Goldberg was a very conservative Republican.
Oh, right.
Back in the
I heard
60s.
that. Yeah.
It's like, okay, so that was like a little dig on Republicans in that movie, even though it was small. Then the next part in that scene and next part in that movie comes then the exposure. I think this is where you were going to, Parker.
Right.
And then the film, when he's in that, they're in the bedroom, and is that the scene where she hits him and she smacks him?
That's even later.
Okay, so
that's even later.
So he gets frustrated, and it's interesting just to see the final.
Well, no. Wait, no, that is the
So it's in the fight in the kitchen. The fight in the kitchen. She hits him, and then they walk into the bedroom.
They walk in the bedroom,
and then he forces her to watch her sin on film.
There you go.
Yeah,
I loved that. That look at yourself in the mirror.
So paint the picture, Parker, for those listening to this, because he actually sets up the camera in his closet that has those old doors, and then he shuts his mom in
the closet,
mainly because we see it light. But I think there's even some imagery there, like your sin is in it's in the
skeletons, yeah,
and it's in hiding. And mom, and then he sits out there, and I love the pensiveness of the character that Spielberg. His son is sitting there, kind of nervously, holding his hands and going like, "Oh crap, what did I just do? Did I make the right decision?" And then his mom comes out, and she is weeping. She's
just
crying.
A mess.
Yeah.
And and I'm that's what sin does. When your sin is exposed, when you realize I can't hide anymore. But think about Sammy had to live with this hiding. But when she comes out, she's a mess. Yeah, she's a mess.
Yeah,
I don't say she's humbled, because I don't think she was humbled.
Yeah,
she's exposed.
Sin has consequences.
And I almost dropped my tablet there. That would have been bad. That scene, like, Parker, you're using words like you loved it. That was awesome. I can't use those words to describe that scene, because, like,
from a filming perspective, to deliver the message is what I mean. No,
I get what you mean.
Right.
I get what you mean. But that scene resonated so incredibly much with me, like, because every single person in the world at some point in life will have that exact moment, or some point after life will have that exact moment where everything you thought was a secret, everything that you were doing willingly in rebellion against God, in what you thought was secret, you thought no one knew, you thought no one would ever know, and you thought you would never be found out, it's going to play in front of you on a reel just like that. And you're going to have to come to the realization that none of these evil things that you or I or anyone else have done was in secret, that there was somebody, that there was God watching and seeing every single careless thought, every single careless deed, action that I have done against him, sinning against him, breaking his law, breaking his commandments and rebelling against him in ways, my thoughts, everything. And all of those are right there on the screen playing out. And and what you said, Greg, is, she was a mess, but she really wasn't humbled. And the terror, the terror that enters my heart when I think about even like the deepest, darkest thoughts of my mind that I don't want anyone else to know about being played on a screen in front of me. Like the terror of that moment was shown so clearly, and I felt it so much when she was watching that film, and that moment in the movie is then, if anyone has that same resonation that I did, that same response to that scene, what that should do then is point us towards the one who makes that all go away. The one who takes that terror and that coming wrath upon himself, which is Jesus on the cross. And then now I can take my eyes off of those evil deeds that I've done. I can take my eyes and my attention away from that and look at his perfection and know that that's the real that's going to play on judgment. His deeds are what's going to be given to me and credited to me because of what he did on the cross. All of my deeds that are playing on that film are on his shoulders, and they were paid for on the cross. And then what's the outcome of that? It's to turn away from the things that I'm doing now and turn to him and live in this new life that he's purchased and bought for me, free of guilt, free of shame, free of condemnation. Hebrews 9. What verse is this?
Nick's going to preach. Yeah. He opened the Bible.
Yeah. Here we go. Chapter 9, verse 27 and 28. I think is just a short little glimpse of that. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. So all of our hope is in him. And if we want that moment where our sin is found out and revealed, if we want that moment to be a freeing one, then the only hope is to rely and trust in his righteous works and his death on the cross, that the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross was sufficient to cover all of my evil thoughts and evil deeds and careless words spoken.
And to piggyback off of that, Nick, I think it's interesting because what a lot of people do is they do the opposite of what you just said, and they double down. And then that's when you start to dig that hole that is even harder to get out of. Because your heart gets hard, and it's just that vicious cycle of just sin begets sin almost, So, yeah.
Well, that was I love that. Spielberg probably didn't think that.
No, right? Probably not. You're right.
When he was thinking that, but even though everything that you just pontificated, Nick, is true. But one thing I can appreciate Spielberg, at least, because it did, in a positive way, I think, change the relationship that Sammy had with his mom going forward. Because then she was more free. And I think, when you live in dysfunction, when you have a family, is it better to expose things and bring them out in the light, or is it better just to keep shoving them down? No, it's better, even though it's awkward and messy, to say, listen, I need to talk to you about something. Now, that's not the case. He had at least enough guts, which I don't know very many, 18-year-old boys that would go, hey, mom, I want to show you your sin.
Yeah, that's probably the fictional part of the story.
Yeah, most people don't have that kind of couth to do that. But now that her sin's exposed, then going forward in the film, it does change the dynamics of the relationship. Some good, some not so good, because I think Sammy Spielberg's character, he's kind of like, Mom, I won't tell Dad. I won't tell him if you don't want me to. So there's this covering up, which some families, we all know people that have, secrets in the family, like, I won't tell anybody, and they go live with that. I just had a friend who told me that after years, when his mom passed away, they found out that his sister married some guy that wasn't the father of his kid, just like just all this thing just unraveled. And so that affected then, it was his grandma infected then. Okay. So DNA, he's like going for health reasons. Well, then when I go to the doctor and I say, I have a history of, heart disease, did I really? Because that guy wasn't really a part of my family tree. I mean, see how that affects everything, and so anyway.
And this is kind of, to, continue on that thought is how it affects everything. And just for the viewers who may be listening, that's really kind of what we're saying, that that sin has consequences because, as a parent, you have to train your kid up in the way of Scripture. You have to train your kid up in the way of the Word, and teaching them to keep things from their father or vice versa, completely obliterates the union that marriage should be. And now you have all of this undermining of authority, and then how is a kid supposed to honor their parents if mom treats dad's authority different or vice versa in those ways? You just can't do it. It won't stand.
Unless your little son at some point goes, don't tell mommy that we ate a whole bowl of ice cream.
I'm going to say, if mom asks, I'm telling her.
So no, you made a good point. And then in the movie, it kind of, so then the dad uproots the family again. And I do say uproot because, they go
it's literally what he did. Yeah.
They go to California, and that scene where she gets out of the car, and I think she was just overwhelmed. And that's when she makes the statement, guilt is a waste of emotion, because Sammy runs up to her, because now he's like, okay, mom, your secret's out with me. What's going on? What are you doing? Are you going to freak on us? You going to run? And I saw some grace in there, to be honest, a little bit of grace. Sammy toward his mom, and her trying to understand and wrap her brain, because she's still kind of, wrestling with all this. And then it was interesting though, she describes her husband, Bert, to her son. And I wrote this down. She goes, then she describes her husband as the kindest, smartest, wisest, most patient, most decent, most understanding man there is. And I'm going to stay married to him. And I wrote down in my margins, people make mistakes. People do make mistakes, and I'm not condoning that. And again, Parker, what you're saying about the consequences, but people make mistakes, and she definitely understood that, at least at this point in the film.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's important to note that I completely agree that we're flawed. We're flawed people. Even if we accept Christ, we're going to sin. We're flawed people. The difference between the difference between mom coming out of the closet and there not being any of that humility that we talked about, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to do this regardless of how I feel. I think those are very important distinctions. We have to get to a point to where you can look yourself in the mirror and say, what I'm doing is wrong, and have a conviction about that, so that it can turn you to repentance, so that there is a change. But just continually I talked to a guy that he doesn't really go to our church, but he was at our church that one day, and he said, I believe in mistakes. And I said, well, like, what's your background? Do you believe the Bible? What was that? And I said, well, the Bible calls it sin, and he got very uncomfortable because of the weight of that word. So I think the emphasis is put on the repentant heart, not the I made a mistake. Is that coming across clearly?
Yeah, I think so. But so I guess something I might add to that is when there's weight. So the person said sin. That's kind of a heavy word, and it seems heavy. When you have that weight, that's where grace can come in all the more.
Yes, absolutely.
That's where grace is actually necessary and needed, when something is so heavy. and you're struggling so much against it, and seeing the destruction that it might cause. That's where grace is really needed. And I think to what Greg was saying, and that is kind of a moment of grace in the movie where her son runs up, because a lot of the time they spent in conflict with one another over his hatred for what his mom was doing, right? There was, and that all culminated with her seeing it and knowing that he knew. But that moment is very different, because now only the two of them know what's going wrong. And when she's in need of someone to help her, when she's in need of some type of encouragement, the one person who knows what's wrong can then run and help her, showing grace rather than the hatred that he was showing before. So yeah, I think that is a pretty good picture of what grace should look like and how we should treat people when they're in the midst of their struggle. While still acknowledging the destruction that the person's causing. I mean,
right. I'm just trying to communicate the full circle of things is really what because I think it's really, really easy to develop a false sense of security when we people just write it off like, oh, it's just a mistake or whatever. And I don't think that that's what you're saying, Greg. I think that you're more talking about the grace, but you have to start with, this is something heavy, and that heaviness gives me the need for a savior, is really where I was kind of going with that.
Yeah. And I think, as Christian men, we would realize that if Mitzi at some point, this character at some point, was looking for forgiveness, but it just, she had this battle, this tension there. And so she did have some quote unquote ethical moments where she's like, I know this is wrong.
Right.
I know this is wrong, but I like it. And she even praised her husband, and she had this,
that's how great he is,
tension. Yeah. But that's sin, right?
It
It's
is.
just in the end, we understand as Christians, it's like, yeah, consider it pure joy when you face many trials. Okay. Well, no temptation has come to you that's overcome me. So we know that we do have an out, that the Holy Spirit Savior has given us an out, and we don't have to choose the wrong side of that tension, that struggle.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of the very first episode of Friends. Well, it starts the very first episode when Rachel runs in.
I'm older than you, and I don't even remember that.
You don't? Okay. Well,
I
watch it on loop. So
it's all right. We actually just restarted watching it, and I slept through. I made it through season 1 and 2, and then I slept through the other, whatever it is, 7.
Yeah.
So so the very first scene, what?
So the very first, the opening scene of the movie, Rachel has just ran away from her wedding. All right. So she's run away from this dentist. He's wealthy. He's everything that she had ever wanted in life, but she just didn't love him. Right. But she was at the wedding, and she fled. And then I think it's in the 2nd or 3rd season, Rachel's parents get a divorce. And it's a big deal to her, and she just doesn't understand it. But then Rachel's mom says something like, honey, you didn't marry your Barry, which was her fiance that she ran out on, but I married mine. So it's indicating that here's this man that I married, perfectly wonderful. And, the character in Friends isn't all that wonderful, really, but
it's actually quite hilarious.
For the sake of the conversation, everything I ever wanted, but I just don't feel the warm and fuzzies. So I'm going to abandon and leave. And that's kind of the tension that she has, that Mitzi has in the movie, is here's all this praise for my husband. He's all these things that he is wonderful at. He's a wonderful man. And, all the list of things that she runs through, and I'm going to stay married to him. But underneath that is the phrase, I just don't love him. Right. And it's kind of a misdefinition of maybe what love is, applying it to just simply the feeling of love or lack thereof, rather than a decision and sacrifice, as the word would describe love.
Would you guys help remind me, because the last scene? So what? I'm forgetting what happened at the very end, where dad and mom were separated, or so she stayed married to him, but they weren't together.
Well, I don't know. I don't think they ever say.
I don't think we ever know whether. I think they officially divorced. I think but in the one point in the movie, Sammy says, "Well, my parents are getting a divorce."
Right.
But I just assume that'd be a good research thing. Like, did she ever remarry? If it's true,
I don't know.
Right.
I just couldn't remember that because I remember what Nick was talking about, and then I just jumped to the scene where it's the apartment or whatever, and that's finally when Sammy, which we haven't touched on much yet, finally gets the affirmation of his father for what he does. And then he gets and then he goes to the interview.
Yeah, but we can't go there yet. I mean, I don't know if you guys have a search, because we got to talk. So two things I want to say. I laughed out loud. It's like we landed in the land of giant sequoia people.
That was funny.
Yeah.
When Sammy said that when he showed up on school campus. And then I thought, okay, Spielberg, what were you trying to say? When she gets a monkey, names it Benny. I mean, that whole scene, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I was kind of almost juvenile to some, but if it really happened, then that makes it even more point. But then we cannot overskip, guys, the whole, I call her Sister Mary, the girlfriend.
Oh my gosh.
Here we go.
But
I thought I really thought we were going to make it through the entire podcast without talking about this.
so I'm going to say, and I was going to ask you guys, do you think this was Spielberg's way of kind of mocking Christianity, or what was going on there?
Yeah.
And I don't know if we're giving a little, spoiler, go watch it, but it was like,
it was very over the top.
It's comical at some points.
I laughed at it.
I think it was somewhat exaggerated, but the point was true. I think the point was true.
That point was what?
Of mainstream Christians in the United States of America. There is a detachment from tangible, real life history, if that makes sense. So, Spielberg and the main character being Jewish, they have a very, very, very tight grasp on their history, right? This happened and Moses did this and these people did this and this is how this came about and this is why we practice this feast and this ritual. And there's that they have
they were singing Jewish songs around a campfire. I mean,
yeah. So, but they have a very tight grasp on their history. But when it comes to Christianity in the United States, we share the exact same history. But when we are talking about Jesus, when we are talking about the gospel, just like what that girlfriend does, is it's pure emotionalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's pure subjective thought, accept Jesus into your heart, without any reality of what that actually means. Without any connection to, no, there was an actual event that happened in our world, in history. The person who was foretold in all of this Jewish history came. God came as a man, God incarnate in the flesh, in history, and accomplished salvation when he died on a cross, that this was actually a real event that we're pointing people to.
So I think if I'm right, I think time stamped that particular area was like in the early 63, 64. Mm-hmm. And so if you, I don't know if you guys seen the Jesus Revolution movie yet.
Not yet.
But that was kind of the start of some of the Jesus movement was happening at that time. And so I wonder if Spielberg, if this was his still kind of little confrontational or dig way, like, I'm going to commentate through all the experiences that I had growing up, because he said, like, Sister Mary said something like, well, haven't you ever experienced, have you not had an encounter in Jesus? She goes, well, my people kind of have done fine for 5,000 years,
Right.
I mean,
Great
he's like,
line.
he's giving
line.
these little Jewish digs,
Right.
but, and I'm just, cause it's the way it is, but he wanted her. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to probably do things to her, because because he never had a girlfriend, and then there was that one scene, where she goes, okay, bring in the Holy Spirit, open your mouth. And so now,
and that's kind of what I'm talking about, is I think that's in a lot of ways an accurate description of and it's not across the board. It's a generalization. And maybe even an overgeneralization. But I think it's common within the American church for that style of communication like this. There's no real tangible connection there with an actual Jesus. Does that make sense? It's like this isn't. I guess I don't even know how to say it differently.
I think it would be interesting to see an interview and say, Spielberg, what were you thinking? And just see what his brain was thinking.
Yeah.
Because, he had those Jesus pictures on the wall, and she had a crucifix of Jesus.
And what did he look? They talked about what did he look like?
Yeah, and all that. But at the same time, Spielberg was saying like, heck yeah, I'm going to take advantage of this. I mean, as the character, he's like, I'm going to take this as far as I can go, even if it means getting this girl in bed. I mean, he just kind of, so I don't know. That just kind of was like a curveball to me in the whole movie. It's like you're boom, and that scene showed up. I was just pretty interesting.
Yeah, I was sitting next to Kayla, my wife, and she's like, "What the heck are we watching?
Yeah, what is it?
Did we switch movies?"
Yeah,
it was. I thought it was really funny. But I think that,
it wasn't. It wasn't like it was unfunny, but it was just, again, I'm going back to my critiquey head over here, and I'm like, okay, Spielberg, what was the purpose of you putting this in?
Yeah, it did seem a little ambiguous.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it was ambiguous, Parker, because I think there was some. If he's sitting down at his keyboard and actually physically typing out those script, he's trying to say, I've had to deal with Christians my whole life. I'm a Jewish man. And
maybe ambiguous is the wrong word. What I meant is it didn't seem clear what he was trying to say.
Oh, okay. I got you now.
Yeah. It would have hit a little harder. It wouldn't have been as funny to me if it would have went more one way than the other, if that makes sense, because of the clarity issues.
Well, and then go ahead.
I was going to say, to add to the anti-Semitism that he's probably alluding to, you had the bullies talk about you killed our Lord, right? So
exactly.
I'm sure that's
a good point.
I'm sure that's all connected.
Well, then when Sister Mary, and I don't know what her real name was, but Sister Mary said when she broke up with him, he said a phrase which I thought was interesting. Sometimes we can't fix things; we just have to suffer.
Yeah,
that was another one. Like, what does that mean?
I think that has to be.
Does that tie into everything that the whole movie's about? We just have to suffer through this stuff.
I think that's probably because of the character that's coming from. That's probably Spielberg's summary of the Christian faith.
Is it that, or is it
actually fix any of the problems in the world?
Or is he also saying, my mom went and my parents got divorced. This happened. I can't fix it, so I just have to suffer through it.
Maybe, yeah. So maybe it's a piece of wisdom that helps him move forward. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because I can't imagine Spielberg even to this day, or that character is going, oh, I love what's happening to my mom and dad. It's like, no, I can't fix it. So I have to learn to suffer with the consequences of what their decisions are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see
that. I don't know. I mean, but I think there's some truth into that statement, because sometimes we can't fix things.
Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, rejoice in your sufferings. Yeah.
Then you got the hall scene with what's that guy's name? Is it Jordan?
The boyfriend. The real anti-Semitic kid is Oakes, I think. Or I'm sorry, Chad Oakes and.
Well, so I thought that was just really insightful, guys, when he said the reaction he had to Sam's movie and how it made him look. That was kind of a head turner. That
Logan,
and even Logan, there you go. Even I think even Sammy, the character Sammy, was shocked that the power that film had, to give him an image of himself that he wasn't even intending to have in the film when he made it.
Yeah. See, I still wish I was left wanting more clarity in the dialogue, because he had this big feeling, but didn't seem clear enough to me what it was. Because he made it like, because you would think like the jock or the he is the like hero of the school, captain of the football team or whatever team, has the girl. You would think that him being portrayed that way would be what he wanted. But maybe it was reaching a more internal struggle for himself that like, okay, well, I'm all of this and then that, and I won't even ever be able to reach that. Maybe something there.
Well, I think Spielberg's, I think his turn when he has Logan say to Fabelman, life's nothing like the movies, Fabelman.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, yeah, but in the end, you got the girl, so but it's kind of like, I think that was Spielberg's way of saying, listen, I made this movie about my life. I made E.T., I made Schindler's List, and movies is, again, like we said at the top of the podcast, it's like, it's just a glimpse of what life is really like. The movies don't expose the whole story.
Yeah. And I wonder if, so I don't even know how to say it, but in the end, you got the girl, right? And the fact that movies aren't real life, I wonder if on some level Fabelman was trying to use the class film to fix what he seemingly caused.
Oh, absolutely. I felt that's what he was doing.
Like,
but it had an adverse reaction.
Right. And he thought he was just fixing it.
Yep.
Who cares if it's an accurate portrayal of the person? It's going to fix the problem, right? And the power of film to fix the problem. And maybe what was his name again? Logan.
Yeah.
Maybe his such harsh response to that, unexpected harsh response, is because this is still somewhat early in film, right? So 60s, this is not incredibly early. I mean, we're not in the 20s or 30s, but this is still somewhat early in the technology and all of that stuff. And it's possible he had never seen himself in any light on film. It's possible he had never even, he can hear all of the praise. And when you hear something, you can kind of shrug it off and continue to pretend. But when you're confronted face to face with something that you don't believe you are, and you actually see it playing out, I think that could possibly have a much bigger impact if it's the first time you've ever seen that portrayal and actually theoretically maybe see what other people see.
Well,
but you've never seen that of yourself.
In movies, as you guys know, since you've kind of dedicated your podcast to that, people who do movies, write them, play them, but especially the screenwriters, they can make you think. Like, when he did his movie and he made it look like birds were pooping in those people's mouths. It was ice cream.
Yeah.
But they didn't know that. I mean, they thought, and so when you watch a movie, your brain, your reality can think that's what's happening, when it's really the screenwriter manipulating to a certain extent, right? Making you think that's happening.
And that goes back to what I was saying about the smoke and mirrors, because he did it earlier in the film too with the film strips. He was going over the film strips. He's like, it doesn't look real enough when they're shooting each other with the cowboy guns. Mm-hmm. And then he punches holes in the film strips so that it flashes, right? Yep. So, and then it makes it look real.
Yeah.
So it's taking, I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying, Greg, where you're taking reality and you're blending it with fiction, or, like one of the things that I like about film is physics don't matter. It's this whole other world where you get to play God a little bit, with character plots and what people do and making things appear and disappear. And
Spielberg, I believe, knew that. He knew the power that film has.
Right.
Yeah.
He knew that 100%.
And to go along with that whole smoke and mirrors point where, you can make things appear one way, that's kind of this entire movie. It's an autobiography that doesn't have the main character in it. right?
Yeah, and it also makes me think of I know I'm going to bring up another movie here, but it relates because Uncle Gary, Uncle
Boris.
Boris.
where did I get
Boris.
Gary? Uncle Boris.
Too much Patrick.
He came from
SpongeBob.
he came from the circus, and it makes me reflect on The Greatest Showman, where people are, that one reporter, excuse me, that one reporter is telling Barnum, P.T. Barnum, it's just a sham. You're a scam artist, and Barnum responds, "People come to my shows for the pleasure of being hoodwinked," and that's exactly what movies are.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I know. And I think definitely in this film, I think Spielberg has those exchanges, because I think that's when he saw the Power guys, when he goes like, wow, I made him think this. And that's not at all what I was trying to do.
Yep.
I made him flip it in his head,
Yeah, sure.
Well, there was the kitchen scene then next. And this is where I think you get into some issues, not issues, some encouragement of grace, some biblical tones. That scene where Mitzi, the mom, and Sammy are talking, and then he just goes, "Mom, I forgive you.
yeah.
I forgive you, Mom." I don't know. Was he too flippant? Was the character too flippant with that forgiveness? Or do you think it was sincere forgiveness? Or he's like, "Mom, I'm moving on. It's okay. I don't like it that you hit me, but it's okay."
Yeah. But yet she really needs to hear it. Right. She really needs.
Yeah, because her heart was wrenched.
Insisting. Yeah. She's insisting. I need to hear you say that. And he was kind of just, I don't know that makes it not true, because sometimes you can forgive somebody without it actually having been said. And then maybe that person doesn't know it even, but yeah, he definitely says it in a flippant manner. Now, whether or not that means it was any less genuine, I guess I really don't know.
I think I took it as genuine because the course of the whole movie, there, mom really was, he got everything from mom. He didn't really get much from dad. Dad was always like, go to school, or, find a trade or whatever. Not giving the fatherly stamp of approval for film and movies, and doing what he loved to do, and art and all that. Mom was really in his corner and got him the camera, and I think that I took it as genuine because of all of those things.
Well, and then in that scene, which is a very pivotal moment, and I think we talked about at the top, and she says, "You do what your heart says you have to. You don't owe anyone your life." Now that sounds very like, frame it and put it on a wall and tell your kids, but Pastor Nick, that's not, you wouldn't preach that.
Not true at all.
Never.
You wouldn't preach that.
If that's the mentality, you'll get what mom got, a broken family.
Mm-hmm.
You think she was trying to use that to rationalize what
I think so. I mean, I think it has to be in some way. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think it's a how do I want to say that? It's a good, or it's an attempt at a good premise wrapped, or it's selfishness wrapped in an attempt of good intention.
That's well said. Yeah, you do what your heart says you have to do. Now, we could probably give that edict, if your adult kid comes to you and go, "Dad, I don't know if I should take the job at Google or I should take the job at Microsoft." And you say, "Son, you got to do what your heart says." But that's not a choice of sin.
Right.
It's not like going to Google is sinful or going to Microsoft is sinful. This was in the context of her kind of speaking into her own life. And she was telling him too, right? Like, if you want to make films, you got to do what your heart says. That has a different context, but she tried to apply it to her own life, and that's when it kind of fell apart.
Do you think that any of that, maybe this is what you're saying, but she's talking to herself, trying to prevent him from getting into the situation. So maybe there's maybe she's looking at film with him the way she looks at Benny and says, "I should have chose film You know what I'm saying?
Or chose Benny. I mean,
Well, I'm saying that Benny represents her
choice
her
of her heart,
choice
of
of
her heart.
art.
Yeah.
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 And his choice is film. Dad's telling him to do other things, and you have to choose your Benny, which is film.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think that's kind of the thing, but I think contextually it doesn't work. It falls apart
Okay.
as a Christian,
Mhm.
so I wouldn't, you know, if I'd known you guys a long time and I say, oh, I want to have an affair with this woman, you wouldn't say like, "Oh, you got to do what your heart says, Greg." You're
Right.
like, what?
you wouldn't have
Yeah.
had to know us that long. We'd be straight with you.
But if I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should make this business decision or make that business decision, you go like, Greg, what's the Holy Spirit telling you? What is your heart? Where do you have more passion for? Let's do a
Mhm.
pros and cons list and
What are the
pray
numbers?
about this. And yeah. What are you make money this one? You're not making, but
Yeah. And so, and this doesn't necessarily apply. So if we're let's say it was the roles were reversed and Dad was the one who was giving the advice, I'm going to follow my heart, I'm going to go to this my wife's best friend or whatever, she's I love her more and I'm going to go be with her instead of my wife. So that rationalization of you don't owe anyone your life, well, if you're a husband, accept your wife.
Right. That's
Right?
kind of a big one.
Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Right? So
see, well, I thought you were going to go with that because he's just as guilty of following that to the peril of his family
Sure,
being ruined.
Absolutely.
there you go.
He gave his heart to his job and he did what his
Yep.
heart said, and then he lost his whole family.
Yep.
I thought that's where you were going.
Yeah. And then the extension of that, I think, is probably the obvious one, and it probably even goes without saying, but I guess I don't want it to go without saying, is if you are a Christian, or even if you're not right now, you owe your life to Jesus. You owe your life to God who created you, who gave you breath. And then even though you're this sinful human being, sent Jesus to pay the price. He's the propitiation for our sins, the payment. And our response is to follow him, to give our lives over to following him. Take up your cross and follow me, he says. So to say you owe no one your life is, like what it's obviously not biblical, and we would never preach that as a message. You owe no one your life. That's just not true.
Can we talk about the last scene and then so where he goes into the house looking for his dad? I thought that was a poignant scene. So he goes into the house or the apartment and he's going, Dad, and he's having his like panic attack. He's like breathing heavily. You could see he's kind of perspiring, sweating, his ties on.
Oh, right.
A
The
little
tea.
bit.
I remember. Yeah, the tea.
Yeah. And he walks in and he can't find his dad, and he puts his head in the sink, the kitchen sink, starts throwing water on his face. Dad comes in, says, Sammy? And he goes, Dad, I think I'm having a heart attack.
Having a heart attack.
I think I'm, and he's like, what? He's 19 years old, 20, he's not very old. He's like, I had a heart attack. And then he comes in, and then Dad kind of sets this emotional thing like, oh, I think you're having a panic attack. Here's what your mother, which is interesting to me that I don't think his dad his wife, he has ever left his brain, his memory.
Nope.
He still is grieving that loss,
Absolutely.
So he fixes a tea, sets it down, he starts drinking it, and then they have a dialogue, which I thought was kind of cool. A father dialogue, but so he opens up a letter from his mom and he goes, oh, it's just a bunch of pictures, of the sisters. And so he gives them to his dad to thinking, oh, he'll want to see pictures of his sisters, right? And he looks at him, but what he didn't realize is that, like, if you imagine just an old Polaroid picture, so up in the very right-hand corner picture is a picture of his mom
and Benny,
not missing him,
right?
Not missing him, but she's smiling, and Benny's looking at her. They're doing these love, and looks like they were at a cookout, a grill, and then he just goes off into La La Land.
Yeah.
You know, he just starts kind of. What was the? Well, can you guys remember the little soliloquy he had there about when he saw that picture?
I don't remember exactly what.
Here, I can try and find it real quick.
But he just kind of goes off and oh, I know, at least I know part, like he was like just saying that, you know, that it's okay. Your mom and I, our chapter hasn't ended. Remember, he goes, our story has gone so far that we never have, it doesn't have the end.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
It's this imagery of filmmaking again, like, you know, hey, sometimes stories just never end. And he's like saying, I'm still in love with your mom and she still loves me, you know. And I think Sammy's character is kind of like, how can you think that, Dad?
Right. She's moved on.
She's moved on.
Yeah.
That was kind of an interesting little twist. And then he comes over and he goes, hey, you know, because then he's like crisis because he wants to do movies, but he's says, I type all these letters. And he goes, hey, you forgot to open this one. And he hands him this letter addressed to him. He flips it over and it says what on the back? It says CBS on it. And so he opens, I mean, like basically almost rips the envelope in half and then gets into it. And he goes, well, is it good news? And he says, they want me to come and do so. And then is it the next scene? Then he's in this office with this guy.
Yeah. Where then it ends with him meeting John Ford and
says there's this new TV show called Hogan's Heroes that we're going to do, you know, and I've watched a gazillion episodes of Hogan's Heroes over the lifetime. And they goes, I want to introduce. Now that producer, I have to say, maybe I didn't know who that was. Is he like a famous? Did you guys know who that guy was?
Nope, didn't recognize him. I'm sure. I mean, it's hard. So because of the style of the movie and the way they wrote it, it's hard to know, okay, who's real, who's not.
So was that a real producer?
I don't even know.
Parker?
I'm looking up. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Like, so I know the name John Ford, so I know he's a real person, but the producer, I wouldn't know.
But then the movie kind of ends there, and he looks at that conversation, which I thought, you know, that's not very good. He looked at it as though he arrived.
Yeah.
It's like
this is the moment.
I made it.
Yep. I'm here.
I just got 5 minutes with Hollywood's greatest,
right.
You know, and then he's dancing gleefully in the
walking down. Yeah. Studio lot.
Studio lot. So kind of a weird way to end it, but probably appropriate.
Yeah.
And then, as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah. So with all that being said, have you found out
it's based on a real guy? His name's Bernard Fine or Fiend.
Okay.
November 13th, 1926 to 1980 was an American actor, television producer, screenwriter, film director, best known for co-operating and associating producing the 1960s television sitcom Hogan's Heroes.
All right.
So that's the other guy. That's the other guy in the other office, right? So what about the guy that he had the 5 minute, you know, now get the F out of here?
That's John Ford, the guy that directed all those John Wayne movies.
So was that really John Ford?
No, John Ford's dead.
Yeah.
But that was, yeah.
Sorry, I thought we were talking about the other producer guy, because was he a director or? Yeah.
John Ford was a director.
Yeah. He was
so John Ford is a real person.
Yes.
A real person. Okay.
Yes.
John Ford was a real person. Yep.
Okay.
Cool. So when they said, do you want to meet the greatest director of all time? At that time, John Ford would have been the guy. Because, you know, all the John Wayne movies, you know, they kind of scan the room of the movie posters,
the greatest movie
that are on
ever.
the wall.
Yeah,
those are his real films. Mm-hmm. Those are really John Ford films. So, but so all of that. I mean, we went in a lot of different ways on the episode. What are the final thoughts? Like, yay, loved it, loved the movie, would recommend it. No, I didn't enjoy it much. I wish it was different. Like, what? Just some wrap up thoughts. What do you guys think? Thumbs up.
I mean, So I would probably give it this.
I was going to say
okay.
the same exact thing.
Here's how I do it. If I said I would not be going, sweetheart, my wife, you got to watch this. She would watch this and she goes, I didn't like that at all. And it's not, you don't like it because it's a bad movie. I'm not going to go out on social media or go to my friends and say, you really got to watch this movie.
Right.
You have to have an appreciation for Spielberg and watch it from that. But I don't think if that was the last movie he ever made, that's not his blaze of glory.
No, it's not. I give it, I was going to give it the same sideways thumb. And I was going to say, it's just really odd. It was just really, I was just like, what am I, like in some of the scenes, like, what is this? You know, that's just what I kept asking myself. Like, this is just strange.
Well, good thing we waited to say at the very end, because then people would not have listened.
Right. They would just tune off and be like,
I mean, to your point, Greg, I think there are worse movies.
Yeah. I mean,
that's not very high praise.
There are worse by a lot. So it wasn't bad. It's just a different film. It's a different genre. I've enjoyed the discussion immensely. I think there's a lot of stuff when you look through the lens, and it makes me want to go dig deeper and to see if I can find some YouTube interviews about the movie with Spielberg actually saying stuff. I agree with that. Yeah, for sure.
Because as a Christian, I would love to see Spielberg come to Christ. I don't know. He sounds like that's probably not going to happen. But
what did you call her? Sister Mary?
Sister Mary.
She was pretty traumatizing, I think.
Oh my gosh.
She traumatized me, and I just watched the movie.
I would give it maybe not a full on thumbs up, but I really enjoyed it. But so the reason I enjoyed it though was because it's a very different movie, like you said. It's very unique. A movie like this doesn't get made anymore. Like
that is a very good point.
In the age of blockbuster, this type of movie just doesn't get made.
It was original.
It's Spielberg, and he has the clout. He's able, he can basically do whatever he wants.
Right.
But
he had to fund it himself, because I don't think anybody would have said, we want to throw millions at this.
Right. And it only made, it's still a lot of money, but it only made 17 million at the box office, which in today's dollars at the box office is not a lot. So
I rented it on Amazon for $5.99. I'm glad I didn't go and spend $40 at the theater.
Right. That's true.
But
I will.
Am I sad that I watched it or felt bad? No, I'm glad I watched it. And
I think that's the correct the correct mentality. I think that shoot, I just lost what I was going to say. Darn it. Go ahead.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, jump in. I forget what I was going to say. It was going to piggyback off of what you said earlier.
One thing I really liked most of the acting. I thought the actors did really well, and Paul Dano, who plays the dad. He plays Bert.
First time I'd ever seen him.
He is so underrated.
He's so underrated.
What other movies was he in?
He's the Riddler.
In the new Batman movie that came out last year.
Of course you would know that.
Yeah, I would know that. I've seen it a few times. He's the Riddler in that. He's also in a movie, it's about 10 years old, called Prisoners. And it has Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, and he's
very
incredible
underrated
in that movie.
He's really good.
I've never seen
so
that.
good.
And the mom was in The Greatest Showman. She was the mom in The Greatest Showman too.
Yeah, Michelle Williams. Yeah.
So
I recognized her, but I didn't peg her. And then Judd Hirsch, is that the Uncle Boris? Is that Judd Hirsch?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think that's his name.
Yeah.
He's 80. He's 88 years old.
He was old when he was in Independence Day in 1996.
Yeah, he was.
Only reason I know that because I love to watch the Oscars. I watched the Oscars the other night, and the Jimmy Kimmel actually pointed him out, and he said, "Hey, you're 88 years old." To Judd Hirsch in the
he's good in everything I've ever seen him in. He's fantastic. Yeah.
All right. Anything else, guys?
That's it.
Thanks for doing it. It was a good discussion.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Greg. We had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a blast. you coming on, and we want to thank you again for having Nick on your podcast. So if you guys are watching, you want to hear more from Greg, head on over to the Digital Church Podcast. That's thedigitalchurch.com, correct?
Digitalchurchpodcast.com.
Digitalchurchpodcast.com. Cool. All right, guys, that's going to be it. See ya.